Through the Gates of the Silver Key by H.P. Lovecraft. Chapter 1. In a vast room hung with strangely figured arras and carpeted with Bukhara rugs of impressive age and workmanship, 4 men were sitting around a document-strewn table. From the far corners, where odd tripods of wrought iron were now and then replenished by an incredibly aged negro in sombre livery, came the hypnotic fumes of olibanum, while in a deep niche on one side there ticked a curious coffin-shaped clock whose dial bore baffling hieroglyphs, and whose 4 hands did not move in consonance with any time system known on this planet. It was a singular and disturbing room, but well fitted to the business then at hand. For there, in the New Orleans home of this continent's greatest mystic, mathematician and orientalist, there was being settled at last the estate of a scarcely less great mystic, scholar, author and dreamer, who had vanished from the face of the earth 4 years before. Randolph Carter, who had all his life sought to escape from the tedium and limitations of waking reality in the beckoning vistas of dreams and fabled avenues of other dimensions, disappeared from the sight of man on the 7th of October 1928, at the age of 54. His career had been a strange and lonely one, and there were those who inferred from his curious novels many episodes more bizarre than any in his recorded history. His association with Harley Warren, the South Carolina mystic, whose studies in the primal Nakal language of the Himalayan priests had led to such outrageous conclusions, had been close. Indeed, it was he who, one mist-mad, terrible night in an ancient graveyard, had seen Warren descend into a dank and nitrous vault, never to emerge. Carter lived in Boston, but it was from the wild, haunted hills behind hoary and witch-accursed Arkham that all his forebears had come, and it was amid these ancient, cryptically brooding hills that he had ultimately vanished. His old servant, Parks, who died early in 1930, had spoken of the strangely aromatic and hideously carven box he had found in the attic, and of the undecipherable parchments and queerly figured silver key which that box had contained, matters of which Carter had also written to others. Carter, he said, had told him that this key had come down from his ancestors, and that it would help him to unlock the gates to his lost boyhood, and to strange dimensions and fantastic realms which he had hitherto visited only in vague, brief and elusive dreams. Then one day Carter took the box and its contents and rode away in his car, never to return. Later on, people found the car at the side of an old, grass-grown road in the hills behind crumbling Arkham, the hills where Carter's forebears had once dwelt, and where the ruined cellar of the great Carter homestead still gaped to the sky. It was in a grove of tall elms nearby that another of the Carters had mysteriously vanished in 1781, and not far away was the half-rotted cottage where Goody Fowler, the witch, had brewed her ominous potions still earlier. The region had been settled in 1692 by fugitives from the witchcraft trials in Salem, and even now it bore a name for vaguely ominous things scarcely to be envisaged. Edmund Carter had fled from the shadow of Gallows Hill just in time, and the tales of his sorceries were many. Now, it seemed, his lone descendant had gone somewhere to join him. In the car they found the hideously carved box of fragrant wood, and the parchment which no man could read. The silver key was gone, presumably with Carter. Further than that, there was no certain clue. Detectives from Boston said that the fallen timbers of the old Carter place seemed oddly disturbed, and somebody found a handkerchief on the rock-ridged, sinisterly wooded slope behind the ruins near the dreaded cave called the Snake Den. It was then that the country legends about the Snake Den gained a new vitality. Farmers whispered of the blasphemous uses to which old Edmund Carter, the wizard, had put that horrible grotto, and added later tales about the fondness which Randolph Carter himself had had for it when a boy. In Carter's boyhood, the venerable gambrel-roofed homestead was still standing and tenanted by his great-uncle Christopher. He had visited there often, and had talked singularly about the snake den. People remembered what he said about a deep fissure and an unknown inner cave beyond, and speculated on the change he had shown after spending one whole memorable day in the cavern when he was 9. That was in October too, and ever after that he had seemed to have an uncanny knack at prophesying future events. It had rained late in the night that Carter vanished, and no one was quite able to trace his footprints from the car. Inside the snake den, all was amorphous liquid mud, owing to the copious seepage. Only the ignorant rustics whispered about the prints they thought they spied where the great elms overhang the road, and on the sinister hillside near the snake den where the handkerchief was found. Who could pay attention to whispers that spoke of stubby little tracks, like those which Randolph Carter's square-toed boots made when he was a small boy? It was as crazy a notion as that other whisper, that the tracks of old Benijah Corey's peculiar, heelless boots had met the stubby little tracks in the road. Old Benijah had been the Carter's hired man when Randolph was young, but he had died 30 years ago. It must have been these whispers, plus Carter's own statement to Parks and others that the queerly arabesqued silver key would help him unlock the gates of his lost boyhood, which caused a number of mystical students to declare that the missing man had actually doubled back on the trail of time and returned through 45 years to that other October day in 1883 when he had stayed in the snake den as a small boy. When he came out that night, they argued, he had somehow made the whole trip to 1928 and back, for did he not thereafter know of things which were to happen later? And yet he had never spoken of anything to happen after 1928. One student, an elderly eccentric of Providence, Rhode Island, who had enjoyed a long and close correspondence with Carter, had a still more elaborate theory, and believed that Carter had not only returned to boyhood, but achieved a further liberation, roving at will through the prismatic vistas of boyhood dream. After a strange vision, this man published a tale of Carter's vanishing, in which he hinted that the lost one now reigned as king on the opal throne of Eilek Vad, that fabulous town of turrets atop the hollow cliffs of glass overlooking the twilight sea, wherein the bearded and finny Gnorri build their singular labyrinths. It was this old man, Ward Phillips, who pleaded most loudly against the apportionment of Carter's estate to his heirs, all distant cousins, on the ground that he was still alive in another time dimension and might well return some day. Against him was arrayed the legal talent of one of the cousins, Ernest K. Aspinwall of Chicago, a man 10 years Carter's senior, but keen as a youth in forensic battles. For 4 years the contest had raged, but now the time for apportionment had come, and this vast, strange room in New Orleans was to be the scene of the arrangements. It was the home of Carter's literary and financial executor, the distinguished Creole student of mysteries and Eastern antiquities, Etienne Laurent de Marigny. Carter had met de Marigny during the war when they both served in the French Foreign Legion, and had at once cleaved to him because of their similar tastes and outlook. When, on a memorable joint furlough, they learned young Creole had taken the wistful Boston dreamer to Bayonne, in the south of France, and had shown him certain terrible secrets in the nighted and immemorial crypts that burrow beneath the brooding, eon-weighted city, the friendship was forever sealed. Carter's will had named de Marigny as executor, and now that avid scholar was reluctantly presiding over the settlement of the estate. It was sad work for him, for like the old Rhode Islander, he did not believe that Carter was dead. But what weight had the dreams of mystics against the harsh wisdom of the world? Around the table in that strange room in the old French quarter sat the men who claimed an interest in the proceedings. There had been the usual legal advertisements of the conference in papers wherever Carter's heirs were thought to live, yet only 4 now sat listening to the abnormal ticking of that coffin-shaped clock which told no earthly time, and to the bubbling of the courtyard fountain beyond half-curtained, fan-lighted windows. As the hours wore on, the faces of the four were half shrouded in the curling fumes from the tripods, which, piled recklessly with fuel, seemed to need less and less attention from the silently gliding and increasingly nervous old negro. There was Etienne de Marigny himself, slim, dark, handsome, moustached, and still young. Aspinwall, representing the heirs, was white-haired, apoplectic-faced, side-whiskered, and portly. Phillips, the Providence mystic, was lean, grey, long-nosed, clean-shaven, and stoop-shouldered. The fourth man was non-committal in age, lean, with a dark, bearded, singularly immobile face of very regular contour, bound with the turban of a high-caste Brahmin, and having night-black, burning, almost irisless eyes, which seemed to gaze out from a vast distance behind the features. He had announced himself as the Swami Chandaputra, an adept from Benares, with important information to give, and both de Marigny and Phillips, who had corresponded with him, had been quick to recognise the genuineness of his mystical pretensions. His speech had an oddly forced, hollow, metallic quality, as if the use of English taxed his vocal apparatus, yet his language was as easy, correct, and idiomatic as any native Anglo-Saxon's. In general attire, he was the normal European civilian, but his loose clothes sat peculiarly bad on him, while his bushy black beard, Eastern turban, and large white mittens gave him an air of exotic eccentricity. De Marigny, fingering the parchment found in Carter's car, was speaking. "No, I have not been able to make anything of the parchment. Mr. Phillips here also gives it up. Colonel Churchward declares it is not nasal, and it looks nothing at all like the hieroglyphics on that Easter Island War Club. The carvings on that box, though, do strongly suggest Easter Island images. The nearest thing I can recall to these parchment characters, notice how all the letters seem to hang down from horizontal word bars, is the writing in a book poor Harley Warren once had. It came from India while Carter and I were visiting him in 1919, and he never would tell us anything about it. Said it would be better if we didn't know, and hinted that it might have come originally from some place other than the earth. He took it with him in December when he went down into the vault in the old graveyard, but neither he nor the book ever came to the surface again. Some time ago I sent our friend here, the Swami Chandaputra, a memory sketch of some of those letters, and also a photostatic copy of the Carter parchment. He believes he may be able to shed light on them after certain references and consultations. But the key. Carter sent me a photograph of that. Its curious arabesques were not letters, but seemed to have belonged to that same culture tradition as the parchment. Carter always spoke of being on the point of solving the mystery, though he never gave details. Once he grew almost poetic about the whole business. That antique silver key, he said, would unlock the successive doors that bar our free march down the mighty corridors of space and time to the very border which no man has crossed since Shaddad, with his terrific genius, built and concealed in the sands of Arabia Petra the prodigious domes and uncounted minarets of thousand-pillared Irem. Half-starved dervishes, wrote Carter, and thirst-crazed nomads have returned to tell of that monumental portal, and of the hand that is sculptured above the keystone of the arch. But no man has passed and retraced his steps to say that his footprints on the garnet-strewn sands within bear witness to his visit. The key, he surmised, was that for which the cyclopean sculptured hand vainly grasps. Why Carter didn't take the parchment as well as the key, we cannot say. Perhaps he forgot it, or perhaps he forbore to take it through recollection of one who had taken a book of like characters into a vault and never returned, or perhaps it was really immaterial to what he wished to do. As de Marigny paused, old Mr. Phillips spoke a harsh, shrill voice. "We can know of Randolph Carter's wandering only what we dream. I have been to many strange places in dreams, and have heard many strange and significant things in Ulfar, beyond the river Sky. It does not appear that the parchment was needed, for certainly Carter re-entered the world of his boyhood dreams, and is now a king in Ilek Vad." Mr. Aspinwall grew doubly apoplectic looking as he sputtered, "Can't somebody shut that old fool up? We've had enough of these moonings. The problem is to divide the property, and it's about time we got to it." For the first time, Swami Chandraputra spoke in his queerly alien voice. "Gentlemen, there is more to this matter than you think. Mr. Aspinwall does not do well to laugh at the evidence of dreams. Mr. Phillips has taken an incomplete view, perhaps because he has not dreamed enough. I, myself, have done much dreaming. We in India have always done that, just as all the Carters seem to have done it. You, Mr. Aspinwall, as a maternal cousin, are naturally not a Carter. My own dreams and certain other sources of information have told me a great deal which you still find obscure. For example, Randolph Carter forgot that parchment which he couldn't decipher, yet it would have been well for him had he remembered to take it. You see, I have really learned pretty much what happened to Carter after he left his car with the silver key at sunset on that 7th of October 4 years ago." Aspinwall audibly sneered, but the others sat up with heightened interest. The smoke from the tripods increased, and the crazy ticking of that coffin-shaped clock seemed to fall into bizarre patterns, like the dots and dashes of some alien and insoluble telegraph message from outer space. The Hindu leaned back, half-closed his eyes, and continued in that oddly laboured yet idiomatic speech, while before his audience there began to float a picture of what had happened to Randolph Carter.